So I was having a conversation with this girl I was dealing with, and we were just listening to music. We were talking about the neo soul video that I made and the importance of it, and how powerful neo soul music can be. And when we were having that conversation, one song that ended up coming through the queue was "Quickie" by Miguel. And for a long time, I didn't understand it. Growing up, there's a lot of sexual shame. There's a lot of sexual shame you deal with, especially when you come up in Christian circles. Because a lot of times with Christianity comes a lot of sexual shame and sexual repression that leads people to have Madonna whore complexes. But in my process of growing up, let's say when I was younger, I heard so many women complain about dudes nutting fast that my mindset was that I didn't want to be that guy. So when I first became like sexually active for real, I was always trying to have sex for like 1 to 3 and sometimes 4 hours at a time. And part of that came from a place that was natural, that was good, of saying like I enjoy being in my sexual energy, so I want to stay there as long as I can. But another aspect of that somewhat also comes from a place of wanting to prove yourself. And wanting to prove yourself is something that turns a woman off if a woman is trying to be in her true feminine energy, and it's also something that can sabotage the situation. And if a woman isn't truly in her sexual energy and truly open to her sexual self, and she's sexually repressed, then a woman would much rather you have a quickie with her than for you to put the works on her, for you to go through that process of rotating between giving her orgasms from penetration and oral sex and fingers, and going through that whole process. Sometimes that's overwhelming for a woman. And the reason why is this, and this video is going to be pretty deep. So I call it, there's a reason why a woman calls a man daddy. A lot of times, men, we don't understand that. Women don't understand that. A lot of these days, there's this narrative coming out that if a woman calls a man daddy during sex and he likes that means that he is somewhat pedophilic. And I think that when people say that, they're just exposing their whack-ass sex life. Honestly, that's how I feel about it. Because the truth behind a woman calling a man daddy is that a woman calling a man daddy during sex really means that he has the ability to use his sex to get that woman into her emotions, right? And when he can get that woman emotional because of the sex, he is now responsible for caring for her emotional state. He is now responsible for maintaining and for leading that woman and for guiding that woman after he's given her that good dick. So what often happens in situations where women become sexually repressed, or they are sexually repressed and they aren't truly liberated, but they're engaging in sex, is that, something I've encountered with plenty of women, and it's women who have a certain level of control issues and a lack of trust in masculinity, is that they will have an inability to have orgasms from penetration because they are afraid of losing control of their emotions with that man because they do not trust him. And trust with the women, just like the song Bigger Fish that I'm making, trust with a woman isn't about her trusting that you will be a good person. It's also not about trusting that you are going to be in a relationship with her. It's not necessarily that. When men try to take that route to gaining trust from a woman doesn't trust that either. Being in your feminine energy, trying to be emotional with a woman, isn't something that turns her on. And a lot of times women talk about this, and I'll say this: a lot of times women say if a man's mindset is that he sees being emotional with a woman as being weak, then that means he's a weak man and that he's toxic. And I'll say this right here: the women who try to use shaming language to get men to open up about their emotions are the exact women that cause men to not want to express their emotions. Why? Because those women desire that emotional vulnerability from a man from a place of validation. When a woman desires that validation from you and she's demanding it, it is because she wants that. She thinks that she wants it to improve the situation, but what she really wants is she wants you to expose yourself emotionally, like my video about the parable of the house in the storm, to get rid of your house, so that because she doesn't trust you, she wants you to show her vulnerability so that she feels like she has the freedom to walk away. Many times, if you're dealing with a woman and you maintain masculine frame, she will have an inability to walk away, because the way her emotions work is every time she walks away, if you do not break your masculine frame, then she will be attracted back to those boundaries. She will be attracted back to your masculinity. So oftentimes a woman will try to manipulate you to get you into a position of showing emotional vulnerability, so that when you show it, when she walks away, she will not feel that maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe he actually is the one. And she won't feel that way, so she can walk away and move on to bigger and better things. So it's like the song Quickie, right? I had a conversation with a homeboy of mine. This is before I ever gave a woman an orgasm from penetration. I was having a conversation with a homeboy of mine, and we went to go pick him up because this girl had threw his clothes out the house. He was living in a dorm with another one of my friends, and when he was living at the dorm, he would go spend that time at the woman's house, right? And he would go to her apartment, and they would pretty much, just shack up and live together. It's not something I'm completely against, but I'm not against it for moral reasons. I'm more so, to an extent, I can be against it at times for the purpose of a man not establishing his masculinity in a situation and allowing a woman to be his provider. Now, I don't necessarily have a complete issue with that either, but I do think that these are conversations that need to be addressed. But when she threw his clothes out the house and she was acting crazy with him, I said, when you were having sex with her, I bet, don't even, you can answer it after I say it, but I bet when you were having sex with that woman, she was like, hold on, baby, hold up, stop. She was trying to get you to stop. She became afraid when you start getting her close to that place of orgasm from penetration, which is her being overpowered by your masculine energy. Instead of giving into it, she gave you the choice where she was asking you to stop, or it may have been a situation where she was like, hold on, but you kept pushing it, you kept pushing it to the point where she orgasmed. And when you did that, it caused her to have a certain emotional attachment to you that caused her to be unable to regulate her emotions around you. Oftentimes, what women are afraid of is losing control to a man, because a lot of times women have experiences where maybe their fathers were Rolling Stones, or maybe they had experiences where maybe they were raped at a certain point in time, or maybe they had experiences where they were really betrayed and mistreated by men who took advantage of their masculine power and their sexual power. So a woman may be in a position where she is afraid of losing that control, so she will beg a man to stop. It's that fear of reaching climax, right? And this is just something that I understand when it comes to socio-sexual dynamics. I understood this even before I was in that situation. And I have been in that situation. There have been women that I dealt with who I could tell that they weren't fully receptive to my masculine sexual energy. So they were sexually attracted to me. But when I had sex with them, every time they would get close, they would run away. They would try to change the angle. They would ask me to stop. Sometimes they would black out. Sometimes they would cry, because they couldn't mentally and emotionally handle the level of masculinity and sexual energy that was coming towards them, because they didn't trust it. It's a lack of trust thing, right? So let's say it's a situation where and this is something that happens a lot of the time. It happens a lot of the time, but in a lot of these scenarios, when you meet a new person, what'll happen is a woman may meet a new man, and this new man may be upfront about his intentions, or he may be someone who she can trust. A lot of times it's that let that hurt go pussy. That let that hurt go pussy is a powerful thing, because oftentimes a man will have an inability to allow a woman to be her full sexual self, because he invested so much in her in order to try to see that return on investment with her sexual submissiveness, that she doesn't trust it. She doesn't trust his ego, because he invested in her without seeing that up front. So oftentimes a woman, the next man will capitalize on the investment that the previous man made in a woman, emotionally, teaching her certain things, trying to have conversations with her, but she couldn't trust it enough to let herself go. And usually with the next man, she'll be able to. And this is what causes a lot of abusive relationships, where a man will be controlling, a man will be possessive, a man will have certain sexual jealousy, because he is afraid of another man being able to capitalize on the emotional investment that he made in that woman sexually, right? Oftentimes it isn't even about the next man. Oftentimes it's about a woman just finally finding a man who she can trust. And when she finally finds a man she can trust, she lets herself go, right? And this is just something that I've noticed. It kind of works across the board. This kind of thing also ties into, just like the song Quickie, if a woman feels like she can't trust your masculinity, like you can't be daddy to her, like you can't manage her emotions and be a good leader to her when she's in her emotional state of being, then most of the time when a woman's sexually repressed, she's not going to have sex from a standpoint of wanting to experience pleasure. She's wanting to have sex from a place of validation, because she wants to keep you around, or because she wants to keep you off her case. It's not necessarily from a place of desire. Oftentimes that's relationship sex, not sex from a place of lust, and sometimes it is from lust, but not a place of desiring pleasure, right? And I've experienced that with different women. Like when I first got into hookup culture, there's this one woman I was dealing with, and first time we had sex, I had my own sexual repression going on. So since maybe she wasn't as open to oral sex as I wanted her to be, and this happened with different women when I first began being more sexually active, where I wasn't able to keep it up because I didn't feel that trust that she desired me. So we were just in that situation, and I wasn't aggressive enough with my masculinity. So maybe the first time we had sex, that didn't turn out that well. But the second time we had sex, I thought it didn't turn out that well because she was always changing the angle. She was wincing. I thought she was in pain. But then after I left, she told me she was moving around and doing all that extra stuff because she felt like she was going to squirt. I've experienced that with multiple women before I started having more experiences where I got a woman to tap in. And most of those instances where I got a woman to tap in instead of tap out were instances where my initial approach to a woman was facts from the jump. I was very thorough, very clear about my sexual intentions from the very jump, and I had a very dominant mindset. There's this one woman I was dealing with where, we were at a party, and I started flirting with her some, and I didn't hide my sexual energy. I was flirting with a friend at the same time, and that night or that morning, we went to the bathroom to have sex in the bathroom, and I grabbed her by the back of her neck, and I said, as long as you're in this bathroom, you my bitch. And when I tell you, she melted, and the first time we had sex, she bled, right? Even though I think she told me she was with like 18 guys before me. And some of them even had bigger dicks, right? But when I hit it that first time, she couldn't handle it. She tapped out that first time. She couldn't really handle my masculinity, my sexual energy. But when I went through that process and I put it on her, it caused her to bleed from that deep penetration. It was her being, dominated by my masculine sexual energy. And usually what I've noticed is that after women go through that experience where they experience such a high level of arousal and such a high level of pleasure that the pain and the pleasure begins to mesh, usually after that point, a woman doesn't have issues with dick size anymore. After that point, a woman usually becomes a BBC slut. That's what they usually call it, right? Where you put that on a woman and she may bleed, and then after she bleeds, that woman can have multiple orgasms from penetration, right? So, this same woman, maybe a week or two later, sometime later, what happened is I made that woman come 21 times that night. There's different things that can happen with these social sexual dynamics that is really an energetic thing. There are a lot of things that go into it. So let's say it was a situation where, so how do I put it? That sexual jealousy thing is a real thing. And a lot of times it comes from desiring a certain return on investment. And this is why intrinsic desire in the blurred pill is so important. That when you make that investment, instead of doing things from a place of intrinsic desire, it creates an emotional tug of war. And a sexual and emotional tug of war. Where a man is going to have to pull back emotionally in order to trigger a woman's ego. And by triggering that woman's ego, she will sleep with that man from a place of desiring validation, right? And that is not really it's something that can work. You can use it to gain sexual access. I don't think it's the best way things can work, but I will say this. If you don't have that experience, then you should probably gain that experience. But, there's another woman I dealt with where I went through that situation where she was like, oh, hold on, baby, hold on. First time I ever met her in person, right? And I kept going. I kept digging her guts until she bust. Shout out to Steph is cold. And, and I did what I did to her. I probably made her come like 5 times that night. And then after that situation, we only met up one time in person, but then she was on my Snap talking about she loved me and stuff like that, right? And I'm like, you don't know me like that to be loving me, right? But one thing that can happen is when you overpower a woman's femininity with your masculine energy, it often leads to situations where that woman will finally open up and give in to you, and that creates a certain feeling of vulnerability where if a woman is sexually repressed, she's not open to feeling that. It's very fearful from her. It creates this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of fear. So this is just something I understand, like that Quickie song, a lot of times that Quickie mindset comes from a woman who is sexually repressed. But I'll say this as well. Sometimes a woman taps into her sexual energy so much, and she is so submissive to a man's energy that it doesn't take forever for her to have an orgasm. There's some men who will come in like 3 minutes, but in that 3 minutes is enough time for her to come. And even if you don't, she is just satisfied with the fact that you were satisfied, and she is completely cool with the situation. This is something that been hard for me. That's been a hard one for me. I've had situations where, I haven't really taken too much of a selfish mindset when it came to sexuality, right? So there were times where, I would often have sex with women for hours at a time, or for I kind of cut it down to like 20 to 40 minutes because I realized women often don't like that. I remember I had an ex one time, and we used to have sex for hours at a time. And then one time she told me that the best time for sex is like 15 minutes. And that made me feel insecure. Why did that make me feel insecure? Because I'm like, well, if I'm having sex for this long and you like 15-minute sex, then to me, that means one or two things. That means either you're not that sexually interested and you want to go ahead and get it over with, you're not really comfortable being present in your body and your sexual energy enough to elongate the experience, or you're the type of woman where there's no tricks that I can do, no tricks that I've acquired over the year of my sexual studies that would be able to push you over the edge outside of me just dominating your femininity with my masculinity. In that particular situation, if I just, just went straight for the gusto and just hit it, and then she would tell me she was getting close and all I was doing was giving her penetration. If she started getting close, I'm like, all right, cool, I guess I can go ahead, and I'm not close yet, so I'm gonna keep stroking, and then I would end up coming before she did. And that was something that made me feel insecure because, or let's say she would change the angle on me, and then I would no longer be able to hold her in that same position, or she would start begging me to stop and maybe even cry because she was afraid of being overpowered by my masculinity. So when these type of instances happen, it really put me in a position where, as much as I knew she would tap out because she couldn't handle me, I also knew that maybe it was a situation where she needed more than what I could give her. And as a man, you have to understand there's different aspects of compatibility. There's different aspects of chemistry. When it comes to these type of things, it's that sexual repression is a strong thing. But it often comes from that lack of trust and masculine energy. And I'll say this right here too. No. I'm gonna leave this video at that. But just understand that when it comes to a woman who demands that a man becomes emotional with her, it's not from a genuine place. A lot of times when women say, I wish you would open up more. A lot of times that's bullshit. That woman is just trying to get the validation in order to feel secure enough to leave you because she already doesn't trust you. And a lot of the times what a man will do is a man will pull back on her emotionally in order to stay in a situation where often, I'll say this, as a man, I'm going to keep it a buck with you. I'm going to be practical. If you don't have a rotation that is strong enough to lose that woman as a sexual partner and maintain the situation, then what will often happen is I think it's best for you to go ahead and pull back emotionally so that you can maintain that sexual situation long enough to find something new. But at the same time, sometimes you can say, what, fuck it. I'm just going to be emotionally open. I'm going to be emotionally vulnerable with her. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But oftentimes this leads with men going through primal panic as well. There have been times where a woman was able to gaslight me or manipulate me into showing a certain level of emotional vulnerability or putting forth a certain level of effort or putting forth a certain level of disclosing different secrets of myself. I call that the Delilah effect, right? Where a woman will repeatedly try to get you to do that, but she is like one of the only places that you can find comfort. And because she presents you the idea of comfort, of doing things the easy way, instead of standing on your ground as a masculine man, instead of standing your masculinity, she can manipulate you into leaving that. And you know what's going on, but every once in a while you get to the point where you start to trust her, you start to believe her, and then you give in. Like this is what happened with Samson and Delilah. You have to understand that. So this is the Delilah, the Delilah trap. This is just something that I've learned to understand over the years. But in the blurred pill, the ideology behind the blurred pill and how to circumvent this type of circumstance is to only deal with women who have the capacity to have a sexual attraction and to desire to build sexual chemistry with you up front without you trying to offer or promise anything emotional on the back end. And, a lot of women, they're afraid of being caught up in hookup culture. They're afraid of being caught up in being used for sex. If your mindset is that if a man has sex with you without a relationship, that he's using you, you have a sex work mindset. You believe in having sex for love. And because you believe in having sex for love, you're not going to be able to fully tap into your sexual energy. And that man is not going to be able to fully tap into loving you. And you're not going to trust it if he does, because you believe he's giving you something for something. And if he does that without you feeling that you've made a big enough investment, then what'll happen is you're not going to trust him because you feel like he's doing it for you. Likewise, the same thing can work for a man who has a Madonna whore complex. If he doesn't feel that he's invested enough in a woman emotionally in order for her to be willing to have sex with him, then he will discount that woman for how soon she has sex with him, right? He will discard her. But at the same time, if this same man makes that investment in a woman and then he finds out that she's been sexually active with other men without that same investment, that'll often cause him to feel inadequate by comparison because the access that another man got without making that same investment. So that's why I believe intrinsic desire is so important, because if you don't have that intrinsic desire in the way that you deal with somebody, and I believe this as a man, start off with biology first. When you start off with biology first, you establish that sexual connection, that sexual chemistry. Then as you spend time with that woman, as you can see that she can handle it, as you're playing that role of daddy to her, right? As you're managing her emotions, as you can see that she can handle it, you start incorporating more and more into it, more non-sexual things, more emotional vulnerability, but you make sure you tie that into your masculinity and your sexual energy so that it's not a situation where when you invest in that woman emotionally, it's going to make her feel as if that she loses attraction to you, right? You don't want it to be a situation where every time you try to show your emotions to a woman, she loses attraction to you, because every man has emotions. A lot of this red pill bullshit, I love red pills, so I'm a red pill proponent, but I'm a proponent of the blur pill. That's my own ideology. A lot of it is based off of trying to maximize your return on investment, but that often leads to a situation where you're going to attract people who have low self-esteem or who feel low compared to you validationally, and when it comes to value-based dating, and because of that, they're willing to give you what you want because they want something from you, and because they see you as high value, the more they invest in you, the more they value you, but the less they're willing to be open with you, the less they're willing to tap into that actual energy with you because of the way the situation went. So this is why it is so important not to go that route of trying to go the blue pill way of dating or the red pill way of dating, because the blue pill is about investing emotionally to get something in return, right? When a man takes the blue pill approach with a woman, he naturally puts himself in a submissive position to her social programming, and to different aspects of her. So when he